And we are live. What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Dwight Cenac, and I'm here with John Chambers and Will from Incel Riot. How you guys doing?
No complaints.
Yeah.
Eh,
I'm
Going good.
pretending like we haven't been pre-gaming for the last 10 minutes. All right. So TGG Network back at it again, and of course we are grifting
Been a
on
while.
the latest stuff going on. Wizards of the Coast open game license shenanigans. I told you guys to save your commotion for the podcast, but you just couldn't help yourself.
We didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
No,
No,
I
you
did.
did.
I'm guilty. I'm
You
guilty.
just texted about it. Yeah, I'm looking at
me.
I had to do some research before the thing, and I just want
Yeah.
to make sure I didn't look like an idiot.
It's funny how a lot of people don't actually know what's going on. But before we go into that, I'm going to take a swig of my today's podcast is absolutely brought to you by Modelo Negra. They're totally sponsors. All right.
It's a white label deal.
Before we get sued for that false advertising, so let me just recap for people watching who live under rocks.
Like me.
So Wizards of the Coast
Under a big rock called the Earth.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast is a game company owned by Hasbro, which is a toy company.
Correct.
And
Yes.
a publicly traded company at that. And Hasbro has been looking at the financials of Wizards of the Coast and has discovered that they're not making as much money as they believe they should be. Color
I wonder
us
where that
all
could
shocked.
be.
I don't know.
could that
I don't
be?
know. We'll go into that.
know.
We'll go into that.
can't imagine.
But they started leaning on Wizards of the Coast, and they brought in. Now I don't know the timeline of the news of the CEO, but they brought in this CEO, Cynthia so and so. I forget her name. But as I understand it, she was the CEO that was in Microsoft games that made Halo into a bunch of microtransaction
Oh no.
gobbledygook. Yeah. So yeah, that works. Oh, Eddie's. Yeah, you're texting Eddie. Eddie's getting in here. So Eddie's usually here, everybody.
No,
and
please
Eddie is-
continue.
yeah. So Cynthia comes in and she makes this public comment like a month ago saying that Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons is very under monetized. There's money to be made here. And so that's where so they're looking at launching like a mobile app, a mobile Dungeons and Dragons thing, and probably going to have a ton of microtransactions to that. And look, I say more power to them. I say do it.
You do?
Yeah, because nothing has stopped anybody else from making an app, and nobody has to download the app. And you can still go back and play any version of Dungeons and Dragons without it. So if they want to make an app and they want to charge money for it, then whatever. It's their IP. I'm not going to download it. But
I don't know. In days gone by, I used to be kind of emotionally connected to Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of like, okay, I guess we don't care now. All right.
What was your take on Neverwinter Nights?
Me?
Yeah. Well, that was. Did you play it? Did you download it? Are you
Actually,
against it?
well, this is so no. You know, it's funny you should ask. I actually did purchase Neverwinter Nights back in the day because Neverwinter Nights, if I recall correctly, it was either Neverwinter Nights or Neverwinter Nights 2 had a pretty compelling campaign creator where you could create your own maps and put your own stuff and make your own game. And it was multiplayer. You could have other people come in and play the game. It was essentially the first virtual tabletop Dungeons and Dragons software out there.
Yeah.
And that's why I bought it. But it was on I was on the cusp of becoming an adult. So like right as I bought it, I lost all my free time. So
no.
I never used it. I never played it. So but yes, I did buy it. But I play tabletop RPGs. I don't need apps for them. Anyway, I'm just saying that it's a cash grab. It's obviously a cash grab. That's what she does, but I don't care. But then they started looking at the open game license. Now, as I understand the open game license well, I always equated the open game license to that D20 system logo on every booklet, everything. So Dungeons and Dragons, a long time, Wizards of the Coast, many, many, many years ago. This is another branch of the story to encourage the community to get more involved in the brand and basically allow the community to push the brand and do free marketing for the brand and make the brand grow beyond Wizards of the Coast capabilities. Basically outsource the development of the game and its universe and everything else. They made it open source. And it was open source with some caveats, like you couldn't do porn, and that was it. Like it was really easy. Like don't be a jackass with our stuff. And so they released the code and made the whole game open source, and people were creating content out the wazoo, so much more content than Wizards of the Coast ever could. And that there's no way to quantify it. There's no way to prove that this is what happened, but like conventional wisdom looking at what happened dictates that making the game open source and allowing the community to just frolic and play in this sandbox was the total credit for the longevity of the brand to this day. And so here we are today, and Hasbro is looking at, and okay, but having said that, tie this all together, somehow Dungeons and Dragons, despite all this massive growth and a movie coming out, they're somehow not making the kind of money. Yeah. They're somehow they're not making the kind of money that they feel they should. Sales are kind of down, and they don't know why. And so Wizards of the Coast, or Hasbro leans on Wizards of the Coast to solve this problem. Wizards of the Coast goes out and looks around, and what they see is a lot of people are making money. On top of that, not only I don't know if the TV series is this what you're talking about, but you've got, and this is, I'm stepping on a point that I want to make, so we'll come back to this, but Wizards of the Coast cannot ignore the fact that there's individuals or crew like Critical Role and Matt Mercer making millions of dollars, basically just pointing a camera at their game table and playing Dungeons and Dragons. And basically they're saying, you know what? We want a piece of this action. There's a lot of money being made out there, and we want some of that because we are under monetized. And so they rewrite the open game license to now basically say, anything you sell that is Dungeons and Dragons on it, we get 25% of. And if you and then and we own it in perpetuity. Like we can do whatever we want with it. And you can't sue us. And this is retroactive to the original OGL, by the way. So we own all that.
Try that. It's not going to go through.
No, right. But this is what
That's
they're releasing.
Not going to go through, though.
I don't think any of it
is. Is that even legal?
No.
Is it legal to sign away your rights? Even I don't think it is.
No, yeah. None of this is, and this is something that's being missed. There's a lot of outrage, but there's nothing really to be outraged about because none of this can hold up in court. And I'll get to my opinion of this, but I want to get to y'all's opinions. But to wrap up this summary, they also said if you make $750,000 or more, you can customize your arrangement with Dungeons and Dragons or with Wizards of the Coast. And basically that's it. Like if you want to create in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, fine, but you owe us 25% or a quarter of your revenues. They linked in with Kickstarter, and now if you do a Dungeons and Dragons with Kickstarter, it's presumed that Kickstarter will just withhold that 25% and give it to Dungeons and Dragons.
They can't do that.
But well, can't they? So that's the OGL. And people are in an uproar about it because they're saying, well, hey, we're indie creators, we can't make any money on this. And what's all this? This is soulless and abusive and blah, blah, blah. So that's where we're at. And Wizards of the Coast has taken a lot of fire for this, hence the thumbnail. There are people vowing to not buy anything from Wizards of the Coast now. And initially they were saying that, oh, well, we just won't play D&D 5th edition or whatever. We'll just stay in Pathfinder or whatever. But Wizards of the Coast was like, no, this applies to everything. So that enraged even more people. So huge backlash. Wizards of the Coast is suffering. And so here we are. It is without a shadow of a doubt, this is an action that has caused backlash. Wizards of the Coast did this thing, and it has caused backlash. So they have nuked themselves and their stupid faces. That is a fact. The question is it the OGL that did that, or is it something else? So how do you guys feel about the OGL? And how do you guys feel about what's actually happening with Wizards of the Coast? Let's go. Let's start with you, John, since you were so eager to talk, you couldn't wait for the podcast.
I think I was just first of all warning you that I'm not excited in either direction about this. I'm like, yeah, this is a great move, but I'm also not. How dare they think of the children? It's really like, well, that is a dumb thing that they did, but these are the people that made 4th edition. So, hey, what do you expect? It was a stupid move, but it's not the dumbest move they've ever made. But yeah, anyone who says that there's any redeeming quality to this action is just wrong, because economically speaking, if Matt Mercer started playing Ladies' Choice live on stream and I said, hey, I want a cut of that money. Like, no, I just got a cut of that money. I don't.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
I just got a cut of that money.
Like he doesn't
if
drive
I asked
sales.
for more than that, dude, I would be a millionaire if he did one episode playing Ladies' Choice. And for me to say, yeah, but you made money too, and I want your money from... No, I already got my cut. And yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, so many people did not even know the phrase Dungeons and Dragons before Matt Mercer. He sold you so many without charging commission.
Yeah, but we can't quantify that. The problem is you cannot you cannot quantify that. All you can quantify is what Matt Mercer made, and what Matt Mercer continues to make. And this is
you
can have a good game.
What?
You can actually count the referrals from his shows if you wanted.
The referrals?
Sure. If the traffic from his goes to your website or to I guess if it only goes directly to your website.
You could count the direct
referrals.
referrals.
He has a show and immediately after the show you get a sales bump.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. You measure the sales bump after the major events. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Then it's to ask, does it warrant? I mean, is there a sales bump? What kind of sales bump is it?
Yeah.
But again, even then, I would argue, and I understand that it gets flimsy as this gets further down as I keep reaching. But I would still argue that it's still speculative. You could say, well, look, guy, I mean, here's the show and here's the sales bump. But it's still speculative. It's still coincidental. It's actually, I don't believe that's even admissible in court because it's coincidental. And
that's what you mean. From a marketing perspective, it's not really a pipeline. You can't count the money coming in.
Correct.
Right. So
I'm not saying that.
But if it was 25%, you could. So I see your point. That's a good point.
Go, John. You have I know you're itching to say this thought, and then Eddie's here, and I want to show something else that is another part of this. But go ahead.
Yeah. So to get back to your point, to change context, put the same concept in new context. Suppose I broke into your house and then started cleaning it. And then I do the dishes and all of that. And then I say, look, I've just quantified the value that I brought to you. It's like, yeah, but you still didn't ask for permission to enter.
Right. Yes.
You know? So legally,
legally,
they're in the right. Legally, they're like, well, this is our property.
Right.
And yes, previously, you guys have been living here. But this is our property. We changed owners and now we're kicking you out. Right. And that's fine. You can do that. And that's illegal.
It's a douchey thing to do. Yeah. I
mean, you But it's almost like, yeah, we want to kick out all of the people who are paying rent every week so that we can build a hotel and maybe get a couple of people in. And like the amount of money that you just burnt to the amount of money you stand to gain is not even comparable.
And
but
that,
you're in legal. You're in the legal right.
That's a solid prediction. It remains to be seen, but a solid prediction. It's something I just wanted to point this out because we're talking I believe that the low-hanging fruit here, the thing that triggered this really was Critical Role. I think it was Matt Mercer and Critical Role. I don't think Wizards of the Coast did this in any intent to be agitative to them. I think they thought, hey, they're making tons of money because and they're making it off RIP. Like they're creating their own characters and their adventures. But that's our that's our game. They're doing this with, and they're making a lot of money, and not just on the show. And you want to talk about direct sales or direct referrals? Those referrals, if I'm Wizards of the Coast, me being an idiot aside, I'm looking not just at Critical Role making the show making money. I'm looking at this website, Critical Role, where they're selling all this merch, and this is all them, and here's their books, their adventures.
That's cool.
It is cool, and it's also a lot of money. Dice and maps is like it's stuff that exists because of Dungeons and Dragons. And I'd be like, you know what? It's one thing to create like a module, a PDF module, and put it on DriveThruRPG and sell it for, $5 and make a couple grand, maybe off of that over the entire lifespan of that PDF, over a decade of it being there before it's forgotten forever. It's a completely other thing to create a show, make millions of dollars on the show, and then create merch and make even more money on the merch. Like, you're making millions on this. I mean, I don't know, but let me see the books and then we'll confirm.
Kigurumi, you nerds.
Kigurumi, yeah, they are nerds. Yeah. If you're gonna go this ham on making money on me, I made this possible. Without me, you are nothing. Because here's the flip side of this. Is because it's symbiotic. Just as Matt Mercer and Critical Role was a net positive for Dungeons and Dragons. If they weren't playing Dungeons and Dragons, they wouldn't have had an audience to begin with. If they came out and they're like, hey, this is a show about people playing random role-playing game, like, they wouldn't have had an initial audience to grow from. Nobody would care.
True.
So they had something to. So it's like God being D&D created man, being Matt Mercer, and then man destroys God, and now man is the center of the universe.
God punishes man.
Yes. Women kills man, women rules the earth. So this is if I'm D&D, I'm looking at this going, no. If you're gonna go, this is not what the OGL was intended for. And now and by the way, we are cash poor. We need cash. It's time for you guys to pay up, pay your dues, and we're all in this boat together. So cough it up. Where they're giving Critical Role pause is their basic where I think they overstepped is they're saying we own everything that you create, not just you pay us, but we now own it. It's ours. So this map that you created for your campaign that we own the map too. And all the characters that you created for your thing, we own that. We own it all. And we can do whatever we want with it. I think that was an overstep. And that will definitely backfire. And because I don't think Critical Role is going to go for it. And I think that's also why they were saying, but hey, if you make more than $750,000, we can customize the deal. So maybe that's their way of giving Critical Role that opportunity to be like, hey, fine, here's your money, but we own our stuff. Like, you cannot take our stuff. But it's still douchey because everybody else is kind of out of the game. That's my ramble. You guys respond, and Eddie, you're caught up, buddy. What do you
Hey
what do
guys,
you
nice
think
to
as
see
well?
you first off. But yeah, just responding immediately to the OGL. Obviously, it's a huge controversy in the industry. Everyone's talking about it, whether they have their hands in it or not, as far as making money off of D&D or anything around it that they've developed. I think your point is obviously a good one. They're going to look for the money where they can. That's been the conversation point. A lot of people are pointing at is that they want to try to further monetize a role-playing game, which that sounds really almost not impossible to monetize this thing. They're putting out books, which have then become in a digital age more like PDFs that are being shared out for everyone already, that they're not all spending money on. I mean, that's a lot of the feedback comments, which is, I have all the books anyway, but I've never paid a dime. And so they're looking at all these situations where they're not making money and where other people are making money to further reinforce your point.
I want to jump into something to kind of piggyback on this, but first, John and William, you got anything?
I will let William go first.
Oh, for me, Dungeons and Dragons died after Unearthed Arcana. Everything else after that is non-canon. Second edition, Thaco, I'm off the bus. So I haven't been paying attention.
You don't like Thaco? You're anti-Thaco?
Hell no. No. Look up
Too much
tables.
work, huh?
Look up tables. God, in my day, you had to work for it.
Back in my day, we played Dungeons and Dragons by
Back in my
candlelight.
day. Yes, you had to have the lookup tables, or you had the lookup tables memorized. Aha.
Which is like the original Power Gaming.
Yes. So, I just today I apprised myself of the OGL, and I read a digest version of it, and my only takeaway that you didn't say already is that it reads, it's very petulant, the wording, right? It reads like an angry 14-year-old girl who is mad at her stepfather.
If you don't do this, we'll stick the Demigorgon on you, or whatever. They literally threaten.
We will
the
decide
user.
again and again. We will decide, and we own. And they even capitalize the word "us." Like, what?
Who does that?
Like, God does that.
You're right. You're right. And we've established that that's what this is all about. Hey, Eddie, tap on your mic for a second. Yeah, you're not using your mic. You're using using your webcam. All right, John, what you got?
Well, I was going to sort of counter your point with a question. So let's just hypothetically say Matt Mercer goes, none of this. From now on, we go GURPS. We go GURPS all the way.
There's a way to go.
Yeah.
And
of course you can say
now, so suppose, and let's just forget a moment about how GURPS feels about this. And let's suppose that GURPS do not put up a fight. Who is going to hurt more from this? Matt Mercer or Wizards of the Coast?
Don't know. I don't know. That is a good question, because I can see how both sides would see the other hurting most, and I think both of them would hurt. I think it's not good for either.
It's a painful divorce.
Yeah. I think the child loses. Dungeons and Dragons hurts the most. Dungeons and Dragons hurts the most. The fans hurt the most. No, but you're right. I mean, it is one of those things where it's a gamble that Wizards is clearly making. They're clearly making that gamble. They're saying they have weighed that and thought he may say no, but we're just gonna, and that's why I think the 750 caveat is their way of approaching him and people like him and saying, look, this doesn't apply to you. Okay. This does not apply to you. We just need to get ours, because this is what I wanted to show you. It's not like Matt Mercer, I think, caught their attention, but there's a reason why Kickstarter is partnering, is really, if we're being honest, is being forced into this. This is coercion. They're being coerced to cooperate.
Let's extend the question to, what if everyone who the license applied to left the license to GURPS? Who hurts more? all the crowd of
I-
people that left.
I think,
know.
yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know. Well, I mean, because that I know GURPS and I've never played it and I have no interest in playing it. Dungeons and Dragons, I think Wizards of the Coast is banking on the normie. And the normie knows that when they walk into a comic shop, there's comics, there's Warhammer, and there's Dungeons and Dragons. And that's what they are. If they want to read comics, there's all the comics. If they want to play a minis battle game, it's Warhammer. And if they want to play a role-playing game, it's Dungeons and Dragons. I think that's what Wizards of the Coast is banking on, is that even if Matt Mercer went over here, they're probably going to lose about 25% of their market share, and that's it. And then that'll be it. But that's why they're going after 25% of the market share. And if we look at Kickstarter, I was just pulling up. I just did a quick what are campaigns that have ended that feature Dungeons and Dragons, and this is what I came up with. So you've got this monsters, 400 new monsters. This is an independent thing for 5th edition.
Dungeons and Keeps.
Yeah, but it's for 5th edition. 400 new monsters sounds cool. I would love to have it. They raised $413,000. Okay. $413,000 for that one campaign. This campaign is items, magical items for 5th edition. How much did they raise? 250,000 euros. So I don't know if it was euro to dollar at that moment, but I mean that's $250,000. That's $250,000. Now check this out. Dice, but not just any dice. Dungeons and Dragons dice based on the damage types and whatnot. Now, yes, you could argue that these dice could be anything. Look at it; it's a 4-sided die. It's a 3-sided die. It has the numbers on it. It's just a 3-sided die, but it's not. It's not just a 3-sided die because they are specifically targeting the Dungeons and Dragons damage types. And how much did they make? $273,000 on dice because they pushed it towards the Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot of dice out there that have been on Kickstarter, but these dice feature Dungeons and Dragons and raised $270,000. Wizards of the Coast is looking at this going, this is all right. You're not just selling dice. You're selling Dungeons and Dragons, and you made $250,000 doing so, pretending that you're selling dice. Here's a dice tower. And what do they say? Exclusive D&D board game set. You couldn't just say dice tower. You could say dice tower. But if you just said
Dice Tower might have an opinion about that.
But right. But then the inventor of the actual dice tower would have an opinion about the dice tower having an opinion about the dice tower.
That's true.
Right?
Did he copyright the name Dice Tower?
So if you didn't say that this is an exclusive D&D board game set, would you have raised $160,000 if you didn't flagship this as Dungeons and Dragons? We're not done. Here is a spell book, a card deck for the spell book of Dungeons and Dragons. It's very cool. It's $163,000 cool. Okay, a deck of cards raised $163,000. So Wizards of the Coast is looking at this kind of activity and going, hang on. See, people think, and this is something I wanted to just kind of put a pause on the outrage. People think that this is about drive-through RPGs selling PDF modules for $4.99. It's not. I would tell you, first of all, the OGL is not enforceable. Okay, hands down, this is not. The only people that are going to play ball with this are going to be the big players like Kickstarter. Why? Because Kickstarter has enough money, it's collecting enough revenue that if Wizards of the Coast decides to sue them, they will. They will take them to court, and Wizards of the Coast will win. Wizards of the Coast will win that case in the courthouse, but they will lose in the process. The process is the punishment. That's the phrasing that they say. The fact that they're getting sued is the punishment, and Wizards of the Coast is only going to sue people who can afford to pay that kind of stuff, because the people that can afford to go to court will do anything they can to avoid going to court. So they're not going to take some drive-through RPG nobody to court. They're not going to threaten them and shut them down. They're not going to send an auditor next to an IRS auditor to their house to audit their books for the last 7 years. They're not going to do that because the person making a drive-through RPG PDF makes $25,000 a year working at Walmart. They don't have anything to give to Wizards of the Coast. There's nothing there to gain. This is specifically targeted towards massive campaigns, massive creators making massive amounts of money. That's who they're targeting. So I would tell anybody out there, if you're making little campaigns, if you're an indie creator and you're worried about this, don't be. Number one, it's not enforceable. Number two, they don't care about you. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you're right. You don't have to sign on. They don't care about you.
Just don't sign up.
The only people they care about are the big boys. Now, will this affect you if you are running a campaign on Kickstarter? Maybe, but then again, what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to raise money for? Are you trying to do this damage dice thing and make a cash grab? Then I don't care about you. I don't care about you. You made $270,000 on dice. Go make an actual product. Go actually do something.
Jeez.
So
Yeah.
that's what that's where I just want to put a pause in the outrage, because this is what Wizards of the Coast is looking at. They're not looking at you. They're looking at this, and I cannot blame them. I cannot blame them from a business perspective. I'll leave that there because there's more to talk about, but I'll leave that there.
The icons on the damage dice, those are stock vectors that you can buy. I've seen those before.
That's what I'm saying. Like, literally, this person is a fraud.
Okay.
They took a pre-existing concept of dice. Then they put vector images that were created by somebody else. And then they said, this is Dungeons and Dragons dice. No, it's not. It's just dice that you marketed to Dungeons and Dragons people with your thing. And that's why Wizards of the Coast is coming after you. And that's why we can't have nice things. You did this. You did this to us, the indie creators. Sorry. That's my pulpit. I'll step down now.
That's one heck of a rant. So what's the alternative? As we were discussing previously, you can't copyright a game mechanic, can you?
No, you
can't
cannot.
copyright.
Actually, they did with Magic. They copyrighted the tap mechanism.
Oh, no, they copyrighted calling it
You
tap.
did what? Oh my God, I violated their IP.
If you call it something else, then it's completely fine. You're just not allowed to call it tap.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so not the actual act, the reference to it and what you're calling it.
Yeah.
And
so if
I
you
just
just
did it
say
as a joke.
rotate, you're fine.
Yeah.
Rotate.
But actually, that does reinforce your point also then, which is you cannot copyright the idea of turning the card sideways for an effect.
No,
Yeah.
you can't. And we were
Just as
exploring
you
this.
can't copyright rolling dice.
I was exploring this with High Noon initially when we were getting ready to launch, and my business partners were like, "Well, don't put this out there because we gotta copyright it first." And I'm like, I don't think you can. And then they got mad at me for making
You don't
a
have
game.
to.
They got
You
mad
don't
at
have
me.
to.
Will, your camera's frozen.
Oh, is it?
They got mad at me that I made a game because we couldn't copyright it. I'm like, what? It's not my fault. It's not my fault. You can't copyright it. But I also I loved the idea of Dungeons and Dragons OGL. So I actually did that with High Noon. If you look at High Noon, there's a logo on the box and it says White Label Game System, because I thought, let me just make this a white label game system, and anybody that wants to create expansions of their own or make their own type of games that are compatible with High Noon can do that. And here's the source code for the white label game system that High Noon runs on. I don't expect it to take off for quite some time, but I wanted to have it there in the very beginning, so it was always there, and we're ready for that. Because I do believe in the growth potential of it, and I do, and I did make a clause, like, if you want to have the white, and what I said was, just like the D20 system, what they did, like I said in the very beginning, was they said, if you want the D20 logo on your product that you're selling at Barnes and Noble, that's fine, but you have to abide by certain rules. Not one of them being it cannot be porn. You can't make a pornographic D20 system and have the D20 logo on it. You just can't.
You have porn, High Noon?
No, I put that in my clause. I basically ripped their OGL almost not entirely word for word, but I was like, this is perfect. Why break it? So that was the whole thing that we did with the white label game system was, look, we made the clause. Look, you can put the white label game system logo on your product, but it can't be porn, it can't be this, it can't be this. And so then that's where, like, that's the only time that High Noon Gaming Inc. would ever sue anybody, is if they violated the rules of engagement for having the white label game system logo on the box. Because outside of that, I want it out there. I want it out there because I want my game system to be common parlance in the gaming space. Just like D&D had the D20 system being the common parlance in the role-playing space.
Right. There's a threshold in which you want other people to participate in your environment, and then they've reached that. Theirs is the product. It's been cemented as the product, the definitive role-playing game. That actually brings me to a point I was making with John earlier. We were talking about 4th edition, was it, John?
Yeah.
That requires defense, professional defense. Yeah, I mean, they've made choices as a company throughout all these years, making different editions of a game, whether it was to do this OGL or that 4th edition game set, where they created a game system that was extremely accessible. Yes, we all know it didn't last very long. It wasn't very popular with existing D&D players, but it was a very accessible system, and it did reset the clock on their game so that it didn't become, you know, what we saw in like 3.5, where this system was so extended out, where you were playing this game and it was so intricate, book into book into book into book, where your character required all of that source material to work from to even be efficient or playable, that they made a new set game where anybody could come in and say, yes, this is D&D. You just play. You what was it? Magic Missile. It just does 6 damage or D3 damage, whatever it was. And that's it. That's how you play this game. You just say it and then you do it. Because they risked losing that position in the environment where they are the definitive easy access game for every person to come in and play.
I stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons at 3rd edition. I'll be honest. I love Thaco. I always preferred AD&D, but I stopped playing at 3rd edition because when I remember I had just started buying all the books and modules for 3rd edition and studying them and getting them down pat, and I created like a campaign and stuff. And like literally, like right as I did that, they released 3.5, and I was like, wait a second, why? Why did you do that? And then I'm like, well,
you buy more books?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. And I was like, well, I'm not going to buy more books. I'm not doing that. This is what you're doing, and I'm not going to do it. And then they were like, and then they created 4th edition. I'm like, stop it. What are you doing? Stop it. Because for the longest time, it was like 20 years before an edition. It was 2nd edition, and we were all toddlers. And then we hit puberty, and then we grew up, and we graduated high school, and then some of us got laid, and some of us became dads, and then 3rd edition came out. And you're like, wow, 3rd edition. And before you could get in the car to go to the store, 3.5. And you're like, wait a second, hang on a second. Do I even like that? Well, 4. Oh, do I hear 4? 4. Do I hear 5th edition? 5th edition. I'm like, wait, stop. No, stop. So I stopped. That's the story.
That's a good story.
Oh my God, Pathfinder would never do that.
That's my favorite story of yours.
So speaking of decisions that Wizard of the Coast made, this is kind of the other half of this discussion that I wanted to have, because all the ruckus is about the OGL rewrite and trying to do this cash grab on the OGL. And as I said, I get it. I see why they would want to do that when they are cash poor and they need cash. The question is, as we've laid out, this all started when Hasbro leaned on Wizard of the Coast for being cash poor in the first place. And so should people be upset about the OGL? Or should we maybe look at decisions that Wizards of the Coast made leading up to the OG, leading up to Hasbro leaning on them about cash being cash poor, the decisions that they made leading up to being cash poor in the first place? And I don't know what all those decisions might be, but I do know of some decisions that were made leading up to being cash poor. Decisions like calling orcs racist. Does anybody remember that? I mean, anybody remember when they came out?
We had a show. Yes,
we had a show about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
How about I think we had a show about them ditching evil. We had a gentleman on the podcast talking about how this is stupid. Like, evil is not. They were offended They were worried that people were being offended. There were people, there were weirdos, dorks, as you call them, Eddie, and whatever John wants to call them, non-customers. John calls them.
Non-customers. Yeah.
Non-customers, yes.
They're offended by the word evil because they project their own understanding of evil onto it, being themselves. But it's not evil like that. That's not what evil means, but that's what they think it means. And so they're offended by it because they think that they are evil, and they don't want anybody to know that. And so D&D ditches evil.
They identify as evil. They identify as evil.
They identify as evil. But they identify as their understanding of evil, which is diabolically, tyrannically evil. It absolutely is.
I think the main concern is you can't really measure evilness quantity by skin color. But if it's connected to race or species, then you can. And so it's like, hold on. No. We're trying to teach people that this skin color evil thing. And then here you're putting this fantasy land where the stuff we're trying to teach as false is true in the fantasy land. I'm like, yeah, let it stay true there. Let it stay true there.
There's that
it's
part.
Not true in real life, but it can stay true there. Like, no, people need to know that skin color and level of evilness are distinct things, and you cannot correlate them.
There's that part that you just said where it's in make pretend land.
Yeah,
this is not the real world.
Let fantasy land keep it.
And for those watching who don't know what we're talking about or what evil is, all evil means in Dungeons and Dragons, in formal Dungeons and Dragons speak, is that it is self-serving. That's it. You're just you seek your own ends above all. That's considered evil in Dungeons and Dragons alignment. There are times where character classes can be evil. There was a campaign that we were in where I was a cleric and there was a minotaur that we were supposed to fight. I don't know why, but I did a detect alignment, and of course they're evil, but they were neutral evil. Not lawful evil and not chaotic evil, but neutral evil. And I was like, oh, this dude just this Minotaur he solely only cares about himself, and he just doesn't care about anything else. But that doesn't mean
he doesn't have an agenda in that situation.
Yes, he doesn't have an agenda. And I was like, well, he just wants to get rich.
He's a survivalist.
So then I was like, yeah, and I was like, so then we were like, well, hey, Minotaur, you're a strong dude, and we're going into this. I mean, you're in the middle of this pyramid of this Egyptian god. It was full of treasure. We could fight, or you could just join our party, and we'll give you like 10% of whatever we find. And the Minotaur was like, yeah, okay.
I'm not a bad dude. I just like money. You know?
Yeah, so we ended up having like this Minotaur on our team for the rest of the campaign, and he completely annihilated all the big bad baddies for us.
Playing as a lineman, you should try to backstab you at some point.
Well, no, we always made sure. I always made sure that I gave him a little bit more than 10% every time. I always made sure that
if he's neutral evil, he should try to kill you all and take the whole thing.
No, because well, maybe. Okay, maybe.
Unless you threaten him.
Well, we made it very clear that we preferred to not die, and we would probably like fight back. So like he could have to smother us in our sleep, but there's always one of us keeping watch. Like he wasn't our friend. He wasn't in our party, but he was fighting with us as an ally. He was an ally through the campaign. And it's one of those things that like people need to be able, like, you weirdo dork non-customers out there need to understand that if you could just step away from your own insecurities about who you are and your evilness and understand that this evil is not your evil. This evil is purely a self-centered, self-serving alignment. You can have a lot of fun with it, but instead they attacked Wizards of the Coast. And convince their woke buddies in Wizards of the Coast to cancel it. On top of that, what was another decision they made? Oh, that's right. They added a disclaimer to every single legacy book. Remember that? Remember their disclaimer? Mm-hmm. Their disclaimer. We recognize that some of the legacy content available on this website does not reflect the values of Dungeons and Dragons franchise today. Hold on a second. Some of the legacy content, you mean the original works of Dungeons & Dragons that made you successful, that made you the company that you are today? do not reflect the values of your franchise today, well, maybe you then are not Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe you don't reflect your customers. Maybe you don't reflect what you should be. This, I think, this right here, was the nail in the coffin that led to the cash poorness that has now led to them scrapping at the earnings of independent creators in this space. I think this right here is what did it.
Non-customers asked for this.
Well, I'll take the bait on the devil's advocacy here, actually, for a second, which is to say that, we're using the term non-customer, but we're referencing 20, 30, and even 40-something years ago as the customers, the players, right? What I just from my own perspective, as somebody who's hosted a lot of games and played in some, sure, over the last 25 years, the people who played the game years ago were definitely playing into a combat system that allowed you to role play. And we are seeing in a lot of the role-playing games that I've encountered outside of D&D as well, that the role-play element, the high society courts of intrigue, has become a huge part of it, a lot more than it used to be, where it used to be a lot of us, murder hobos in the earliest days. And there's been a lot of focus on shifting towards that, which, that's cool, because that is why you do role-play, if so freely in a free realm like these games allow. So maybe the non-customer actually is, again, I'm taking the devil's advocacy here, the people who just want combat systems, just want to go out and kill that evil, motivated characters with easy identification, as opposed to the people who do want a lot of nuance in their game and want that to not be defined in books. I'm going to give the conversation the angle that it could have.
I think you're using too strong of words, and they're not only triggering me, but they're triggering the non-customers. They're triggering the non-customers, and I say that because in preparing for this podcast, I was reminded, just at a moment, and I was reminded of a picture that I took and shared with the chat a couple months back. I was working on a module for my High Noon role-playing game, and I wanted to glean some inspiration from modules that already existed. And so I went to the store and I went to a comic game store, and I was like, hey, do you have any, it was a murder mystery thing. And I was like, do you have any murder mystery campaigns for Dungeons and Dragons or anything? And they were like, yeah, actually we got this one book. It's got a bunch of different modules in it. One of them is murder mystery. Check it out. And so I went in and I started reading this official. This is not an indie created licensed book. This is an official Dungeons and Dragons book written by Wizards of the Coast. And what did I find in the very front page of this book? Okay, this book that is written for the customers. The Wizards of the Coast has decided. They've decided that this block will be our customers. These are going to be our customers from now on. These are our customers. Okay, who are the customers? Well, they spelled it out for us in the very beginning with this disclaimer in the book, and I took a picture of it. I share it with you guys. I'm going to share it with the show here. Here it is. Be a sensitive dungeon master. Before running an adventure with a new group of players, have a candid out-of-game conversation with them about hard and soft limits on what topics can be broached in-game. What?
Can I
what?
interject?
Your players might have phobias and triggers that you aren't aware of. Any topic or theme that makes a player feel unsafe should be avoided. Yes, you can interject, but no, you can't. Let me finish, and then you can just have the floor. You can have the floor, because I'll just end it with this. Be ready to move away from such topics and things and themes quickly if a problem crops up. If a problem crops up, if you're sitting at a table and your players start becoming a problem at your table, change the subject. Change the campaign to appease them, because it's okay. Don't kick them out of your house. Don't be like, hey, dude, you're kind of weird and you're messing up the vibe. I don't think you should come back. Don't do that thing that we used to all do back in the day. No. Just change the entire game for these soft pansies, because it's okay for characters to feel stressed and anxious, but your players should be relaxed and having fun. And we all know that people who get triggered by make-believe-ness are people that are also capable of having fun. These two things are mutually exclusive. You cannot be triggered by make-believe nonsense and also be capable of having fun. It's not possible. It's not. I cast disbelief on that spell, on that situation.
All right, I want William's take on this. And then
Will, the floor is yours.
Okay. Speaking as somebody who's worked in well, close to marketing and media for the past several decades, back in the day, in the long ago, in the before time, there was a thing that people used to do called market research, right?
Oh, okay.
And
what is that? What is that?
Demographics. What?
It required that people go outside, right, and go find out who their customers are. And it was understood that the customers from one group of customers for one product might be different from another product. And there's a variety of techniques that people would use. You create these personas, right? And it wasn't obvious, right? It was hard work. It was very hard work. And yes, you would have to go outside, you have to interview people, you'd have to go to shows, and you'd have to do a little bit of digging to find out who your customer was and what they really wanted. Okay. That was before. People do not do that. Oh, wow. Okay. People do not do that anymore. They don't do that anymore because it's work, right? Today, they just rely on social media to tell them who their customers are. They have their page. And instead of going out and finding the customer, they wait for the customer to come to them, right? And who comes to them are the people who yell the loudest, the neurotic people, the not well situated people, the people who with emotional problems, they're the ones who yell the most. And so if they get like somebody like me, if I don't see something I don't like, I just click it off. I don't complain. I think most people are that way. I just go, it's an open market. I can go do what I want. But somebody who is crazy has to let you know. So based on the information they get, these people, right, are yelling. So that must be the audience, and that doesn't explain just D&D. That explains pretty much everything these days, and that accounts for woke culture in business generally. It's just you respond to people who yell the loudest.
Will,
right.
you're
Companies
making
have this opportunity.
Will, you're making too much sense. The Chinese are trying to silence you. They've frozen your camera.
Yeah, it started breaking up.
You
That's
can
okay.
still hear
You
me.
got the message out.
The
Yeah, we got you. So corporations do have an opportunity at all times, and obviously it would benefit them all if they just kind of came to this conclusion at once and made a loud statement on the fact that they can literally just do business and not address the complaints that they receive. They really, really could. I know it sounds like, what's that word? Insensitive. We can borrow from that book paragraph there. So just getting back to that book paragraph, though, the idea that you could be a sensitive DM is now there in text, right? But it's also there for you to ignore. So this kind of correlates back to the idea of what the corporations could do at this time or any time in history when looking for those demographics, doing that market research for who actually is the buyer as opposed to the the non-buyer? What do we call them? Non-consumer? Non-customer, right. As opposed to the non-customer. So you're listening to the loudest voices, to William's point. And that same exact phrase in that book is really just there for me, you, sounds like everyone in this room actually, to say, well, that's stupid and I'm going to laugh at that and I'm going to challenge my table no matter what, to whatever degree I've decided, right?
Yeah, but the fact that they're but the fact that they are publishing this in their books in mass production is evidence that this is who they've decided is their target market now.
Yeah.
And this person, and I know I used a lot of harsh words, okay, to judge this type of person. And I understand that there's an exception to every rule. Okay. What I stated, I maintain is the rule. People who act like this are incapable of having fun. So these two things they don't work together. That's the rule. What's the exception? People who actually have experienced trauma and are suffering from an actual PTSD, I wouldn't say mental illness, but a PTSD mental trauma that they have to be treated for. They are currently being treated for. And there's no judgment on those people, but those people are the exception that prove the rule. By and large, these people are incapable of having fun. They're non-customers. And on top of that, they make up a fraction of a percent of the population. So what Dungeons and Dragons did was, what Wizards of the Coast did, was they said, you know what? For the last 30 some odd years, we have been a product designed to be consumed by the masses. And now we are going, okay. No, well, it can be consumed. Listen, my dad was a hardcore 700 clubber, okay? He was the guy, you know what I'm saying, okay? He was the guy who I had to secretly play Dungeons and Dragons with my friends.
Oh, same
and
here.
Never tell them about, right? Okay.
Mine got confiscated.
I now have him playing. I got him into playing role-playing games through the High Noon RPG, and he's now totally on board with playing Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is a product for the masses. Anybody can play it. And Dad's not a gamer. He's not a role player because nobody is until they try it. Dungeons and Dragons is a game for the masses. There's going to be people who don't like it, but by and large, it is. The people what they've done now is they've decided, they've made a stand, they've planted their flag and said, no, we are now going to be a product designed to be consumed by a fraction of 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 the percent of the masses. That's who our market is now. And we are now going to tell you to be sensitive to those people. If you are like these four dudes on this podcast who point and laugh at that, well, we're going to tell you guys, especially you guys, to be sensitive dungeon masters, because regardless of how you feel that this may be stupid, your players should feel relaxed and have fun. So before running an adventure with a new group of players, have a candid out of conversation game. They're telling us, Eddie, they're telling you and me and John and Will how to be game masters, and they're catering it towards that fraction of a fraction. And there's people that are going to see that. There's people who see that and go, no. On top of all this other nonsense, on top of telling us that the original games don't reflect your values somehow because you're a bunch of virtue signaling cucks, and you're telling us that orcs are racist. You're telling us that that the evil alignment needs to be canceled. Like no,
somebody yelled.
No, and you're doing this because the fraction of the fraction of the fraction of the fraction of the fraction percent of weirdos are upset about it. No, and that's what you're seeing. What I believe, and we can disagree, and that's what this panel is for. But what I believe is that these are the decisions that directly led to Wizards of the Coast becoming cash poor and forced by Hasbro to now threaten to take money from indie creators who were largely these weirdos, by the way. Like largely those people are these weirdos that they're talking about.
You say it's for the masses, but it's open to the masses, but really it's a thing for a specific kind of boy.
Fair enough.
On the very far eastern end of the autistic scale.
Fair enough. I'm an autist. All right, I'll admit it.
You gotta be, you gotta be at least borderline autistic to be able to comprehend like combat and social interactions through numbers, right? That's love it or hate it. That's very much a boy thing.
Break down reality into a code. Yeah.
Into literally data, right?
I'm going to shock you all and let you know I completely agree with the paragraph.
Yeah, I'm actually going to probably agree with you. Where did you want to go, John?
Every word. But I do think that there are some bits of it that are misunderstood. But I think
I think that's where the conversation exists, right here with a mutual education program we could all have, which is to say that thing is very neutral, actually, and it's phrasing. It doesn't say it's about the orcs. It's not about. I'll tell you what I think it's about, and I'll tell you what I kind of know it's about.
I like that the panel is
it's the crosses. No, we've literally got like the Green Party, we got the Libertarian, we got the R over there. I don't know which one he was there.
My lower right.
Go ahead. Who wants to go? Who wants to disagree first? Who wants to disagree first? John, you want it?
John, go ahead, man, if you want it.
I'll go. Okay. I've got the floor. Okay. No. My point here about that paragraph is the importance of session 0 And a lot of people kind of skip session 0 and they really, really suffer for it.
They regret
And
it.
so,
Yeah.
let's just suppose I've got a great campaign set, and I know there's going to be the scene where that person gets raped, and I've got that other scene where all the blood gushes out, and I've got the people dying of starvation, and all of that stuff. And then I get to session 0, and imagine if I found out 5 days in that someone didn't like that. And this is not me saying, hey, get back to work, harden up. No, they're not at work. They don't have to like it. When you're at work, you've got to like what you put up with. But this is their time off. And like, oh, I didn't like the gushing blood. You took 5 minutes describing the blood. And I didn't like that bit. And if I found that out at session 0, I could have either gone, well, okay, you do bring a lot to this, so maybe I'll skip the blood bit. Or I could have gone, well, no, there is a lot of blood in this one. You might want to step this one out. But that conversation is absolutely vital, because otherwise you get people stuck at your table that shouldn't be there. And you need to have everybody know where they are and where they stand so that you can move them on. Skip that conversation at your peril. Because, most of the time nothing bad will happen. But, yeah, skip that conversation at your peril, because when it goes south, it goes really never speaking to you ever again south.
I have a thought on that, but Eddie, you go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing that definitely has come up in role playing and specifically D&D is that there was a fraction of the player base that would have been to be ignored, and that is actually women. Women at the table with role playing games have experienced a little bit of what John just touched on, which is there's that one planned rape scenario. Now, it's not usually actually a planned rape scenario that they encountered. It's the players themselves, when it's the one girl at the table with 5 dudes. And for whatever reason, it's always the girl has to go seduce something because she exists in the player party. Always being forced in that situation, or sometimes even more direct involvement with one of the even player/characters, right? Using her womanhood against her in the play space. So that's kind of what they're really addressing. I know it's come up many times over at least the last 10 years that I know of, where women definitely don't feel welcome while joining these game groups because they don't know. And it's reinforcing John's point, which is they don't know. Now, if they get to say something and then they do get to know, and then the DM also gets to know before they all start playing that this isn't going to be welcome for them, then they keep playing. And then all of a sudden your game group is actually 3 women, maybe three couples, whatever it is. And now women are actually playing this game and they're not being told, hey, what you don't know is what you're going to suffer. And that's it. That's the game. That is D&D. So if you don't like it, then you don't like D&D. And now you continue to be fraction of people that would actually play in D&D, because this is not actually appropriate for women or enjoyable at all to you. So that is why it's in there, because it's actually really neutral language. It doesn't say you can't do this stuff, you can't say that stuff. It's just listen to whether you should say this stuff.
Okay, so I
would like to define the line that shouldn't be crossed. That paragraph didn't cross the line, but I'd like to define the line where the line is, where everything else crossed that line.
Okay, go ahead.
And the line.
You want to bring it up again, or?
You can kind of scroll through them, because it applies to everything. When you are getting rid of content, you're saying, oh yeah, this downloadable link, that link doesn't work anymore because that link goes against our values. So
actual censorship.
Yeah, but before there were 150 things you can download, but now there's 120. And so that's usually a response to a non-customer saying, hey, there's this thing I don't like. It's not, I don't like in the sense of, can you please tag it so that when I'm searching, it can disappear from my search results. It's like, right. I don't like that this is perpetuated in society. I don't like that this has become popular. I don't like that people think this is okay. And when you get into that, I don't like, grow up. Other people like it. You don't like it. Let them like it and leave them alone. Okay. And
what's good for some is not okay for all.
Yes.
So
but
that's when the line is crossed.
It's like, okay, here's all of this stuff I don't like. Could you please put a little tag on the top saying may contain such and such that you don't like? You know, all of the modules that mention the word rape or have got any kind of rape in them.
What modules are you? Okay, no, I gotta stop this. What modules are you
Whatever.
guys
It's an
talking
example.
about?
It doesn't
I
have
want to
to
know
be-
that too.
Well,
What
it's not a
rape
whatever.
module?
that
No,
third
no,
party
it's not a
stuff.
whatever. It's not a whatever. This is you brought it up and Eddie brought it
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
and this is something that I will admit is
It's our
anecdotal
extreme
to
example.
me.
Apply it to racism, apply it to species, apply it to anything that
Racism.
upsets you.
Fair-
You
fair-
always use the most potent example.
But you got to
Right,
use
it's
an
always
example.
Nazis.
You got to use something that actually exists. Like what campaign in the like what module or what game master has ever forced a situation of rape into or grape, so we don't get demonetized, into a campaign with women. I know of one story. I know of one story on Reddit where allegedly there was a DM who, and it was a virtual role-playing game where they were playing in a message board or something, and the DM basically, it was a group of women who were players, and the DM was a dude, and the DM basically ensured that all of them were graped in their sleep. First, they were molested in their awakeness, and then they were graped in their sleep in the tavern, and there was nothing that these girls could do about it, and they felt unsafe, and they felt angry, and they just had to get onto Reddit and write this whole diatribe about how this thing actually happened. And I maintain it didn't happen. I cast disbelief on that story. That's not to say that it didn't happen, okay? I just don't
Right.
believe
So the
it
answer is
happened.
still anecdotal, no matter what. That who did this, who didn't do this, whoever did it.
I don't believe that has ever happened. And if it did happen, it happened with it happened. And this is a point that I was going to make with Eddie. The situation you're talking about just sound weird. They just sound like they're the DMs are weirdos, like weirdo dork.
Yeah, and I was saying it's not necessarily a planned rape situation. It's literally raping.
Okay, but a disclaimer in a book is not going to convince that weirdo dork not to do it. Just like telling a murderer, "Hey, dude, murdering is wrong. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you shouldn't stab somebody in the face and take their wallet." Like, no, if the guy's somebody who's going to do that kind of thing, they're just going to do it.
You're actually making the point, though. So a law has to exist on the books to say don't rape, don't murder.
No.
It does actually have to exist on the book somewhere. I'm not saying the D&D book. I'm saying
a law.
Books.
Yes,
but
a law.
Also,
but this is not a law.
It is in the book here so that people can reference me. Hey, dude,
it's not a law.
You're not being a sensitive DM. This is a
not
suggestion.
A law. It's not a law.
It's
not a. It does not. It's not a law.
It's definitely not a law, but it's a suggestion.
It's a virtue signaling paragraph, right? A suggestion. You can't suggest to a murderer not to murder, just like you can't suggest to a DM who's going to grape players at their table because they think that's a great idea not to do it. They're weird. They're just weirdos. And but to the point though, I do believe there are weird DMs who don't know how to DM, and I would extend this, that what we're really talking about is a symptom of a greater disease, which is DMs that suck. And if you're going to try to address every problem that a DM could do that sucks, you're going to have a lot of paragraphs. And so what I would suggest, and it's not a law, but maybe it should be, is first of all, before I get to it, I just want to make sure I understood you, John. You said session 0 and then 5 days. Are you saying that session 0 takes 5 days to do, or were you basically implying that there was 5 days after session 0 where the feedback comes in and people don't like it? Or do you remember what you were talking about?
No. What I was saying is, in an example, let's suppose that my session, the first 4 days were completely tame. There was nothing objectionable in there. And then I used an extreme example but you can imagine it with a lesser example.
Whatever schedule.
Okay,
but then eventually
that's not.
They've already invested 4 days of time, and then there was this other triggering incident. It could be anything. And they didn't like it, and it took me 4 days to find that out. Whereas I should have found out.
So 4 days of leveling up and getting 4 gaming days, 4 solid
game sessions of commitment.
So we're not talking about session 0 anymore. This is session 4.
No, I'm saying find out.
His point is, if you don't use a session 0, you might go 4 sessions of play before you come to this conflict.
So right,
there we go.
So
exactly.
Okay. So session 0 is, and so for those of you watching. I'll explain to you, those of you watching who don't know what session 0 is, what the concept of session 0 is, and then John, and I'll steel man it for you, John, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, because there is a common understanding of session 0. Session 0 is basically the character. It's the introduction to the game. So you're doing your character creation, you're explaining the rules, you're explaining the universe, you're explaining how things are going to work in the game. You're getting people introduced to the game. It's generally a long, arduous session where not a lot of gameplay happens because it's more focused on establishing to the players what their expectations for the game moving forward will be. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, the only change I'd say is no gameplay happens session 0.
Right. Okay. Yes.
No gameplay.
Okay. So here's what
I put aside 3, 4, 5, however many hours you need.
Right. Okay. So this is where I want to reference something. There's a channel, an amazing channel for DMs. It's called Dungeon Craft. And this guy is, if anybody who's watching this, you've never seen Dungeon Craft, and you're a DM, and only go if you're interested in DMs. Don't do it if you're a player, because it'll totally ruin your experiences moving forward. Because it's the guy really, imagine a magician explaining how magic works to other magicians so that they can do better magic tricks.
And Arrested Development.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I never saw it, but yeah. But if you were a magician, if you're an aspiring magician, you would want to subscribe to that. But if you were an aspiring audience member, an aspiring spectator of magic tricks, you do not want to watch it because you don't want the magic to be spoiled. Dungeon Craft is that channel. It is a channel for dungeon masters, and he has a whole video, which is it changed my life. And it's funny that you bring up session 0 because I just watched this video. It's like, I think it's a year old or something, but I just watched it like yesterday. And what he does is he advocates, in fact, not to do session 0, but to do session 0.5. And the purpose of session 0.5 is to hang on, Luke wants to reschedule. He's doing super chats on his channel. The point of 0.5 is to accomplish the things that you're talking about, which is introduce the players to the game, get a feel for who these players are, like really, really read them at the table, but also introduce them, actually do a session, like actually get them playing, because what turns off players more than anything, especially women, okay, especially the girls who are not sure if whatever, the number one thing they're not sure of is, are they going to have a good time? Is this going to be boring? So if you bring a girl into a session 0 and she's not autistic, she's going to check out. She's going to be Titania. She's going to leave, and then the DM's going to play Titania. So he recommends,
statistically true.
He recommends that you do a 0.5 where you do what you do is you don't even address the rules or the universe. You intentionally create a very soft scenario where it incorporates social interactions, it incorporates combat, and incorporates problem solving. You just make sure you have those 3 things.
So this is a rule set for introduction to characters or introductory games for people who are not already role players.
Yes,
though.
Right.
So once you've got any amount of experience, you can literally skip that whole step because it's
you could, but I would recommend that you do that even to players who understand the game, because you're introducing them not just to the game and the game mechanics, you're introducing them to your world. And you're introducing them to your play style, your play style, your DM style, your universe's moralities, immoralities, the things that they could run into. And this is where you don't introduce it as great.
Establish that.
But what you do is, your job as the DM is to read that table on 0.5. That's your job. It's your job to get them playing the game and reading them to get to know who these people are, so that moving forward into those 4 sessions, you already know who your players are and you don't run the risk of doing something stupid. Now, none of us are going to introduce, I would imagine, none of us would ever introduce a grape scenario or a molestation scenario or you're a girl, go use your sexual wiles on this man and seduce him.
Well,
I've done all of the above.
Even
but
if
it
that
went
were in
downhill.
the game, does not.
Of course you would, John. Of course you would.
Doesn't she control her own character? Can't she decide whether or not she wants to do that? How does the DM force a player to do something?
Because I would just and I'll steel man this for you, Eddie, but just because meeting in the middle here, girls are very agreeable. That's their nature. That's why they negotiate less. That's why they negotiate less than men in the workplace and tend to make less money. One of the reasons why is because they're generally agreeable. They don't like conflict. So it's not so much that they're forced by the DM. It's they could feel like not going in that direction will cause some sort of negative interaction or negative outcome for themselves or the rest of the table. So they just go along with it.
There's also the chance that the rest of the players are saying, just do it so we can get through this.
But that comes to the point. Like what William's saying is, why wouldn't the girl then in that situation go, no, guys, I'm not going to do that. F you. Because generally speaking, girls in these situations, they'll just do it because they don't want to have that confrontation. They'll just do it. And then they'll regret it later. And and then you have these stories. You have these stories of regretful sex, and they call it great because they have it, and then they regret it because they're like, well, I didn't want to do it.
This conversation just took a turn.
Well, it is. I mean, if we're gonna,
that happens.
It does. It does
anyway,
happen.
If we want to talk, can we talk about?
No, but I'm not. No, okay, listen. Not to virtue signal here. William Incel Riot Studios virtue signal. Get the game at incelriotstudios.com. But nobody here is advocating anything that we're talking about right now. We're making the point.
I'm just making jokes.
Okay, fine. But I agree with you, Eddie, that girls can feel vulnerable, especially if they're new and they don't know the table or whatever. That's why I really have bought into this the 0.5 concept, because it's session 0 like you're talking about, but at the same time it's not boring, and it gives you an opportunity to really feel the room without preaching to them, without making, because here's another thing is it's also uncomfortable to have people admit to you what they're uncomfortable about. Like if you're like, hey, so what's triggering you? What triggers you? What are your traumatic pain points? I don't know. Let me scrape off that scab of my brain that my brain mentally scarred over that memory for my own protection, so that I can tell you.
Here's the stuff I got planned. What on that list should I cross off?
Therapy.
But even
here's the list. Just look through everything on that list.
It's like going to the doctor's office. Have your experience.
Here's a list. Let me give you a list so you can read these and get mental visuals, psychologically traumatic mental visuals of anything on this list.
The DM writes the list.
I know the DM. Yes, I know. That's what I'm saying. We have forced butt sex on the list. We have grape with 8 men riding a train on you. Anal grape of 8 men riding a train on you. It's right here. If that triggers you, just let me know. Have you ever experienced that before? Just tell, you're forcing this person. You're forcing this person to create a mental image. If they are the kind of person to have been triggered by it, it's because they've experienced it.
If you can't discuss it, why did you put it in the game?
It's not me. Because you're a freaking weirdo. That's why. Because you're a weirdo. Because who puts that in a game? The kind of weirdo that needs a paragraph written in a book that says, "Don't put that in your game." That's what I'm talking about. They're marketing to this little speck of weirdos. Like, I'm getting a vein just trying to get it through you.
A lot of your argument presupposes a skilled DM, though.
At best,
it's
pointless because adults do not.
What my argument presupposes that this is a symptom of a disease, of a bigger disease, and the bigger disease is that they are bad DMs, and you're not going to solve being a bad DM by plucking out a single issue, being a bad DM putting triggering situations or stupid weird situations in there that like of those of the traumatic that could trigger traumatic responses. That's one thing that a bad DM could do. You know what another bad thing a DM could do? Force everybody to show up in costume and play the game standing up, and they can only sit down when we're taking breaks and you're sitting on the toilet because it's a potty break. Like, that's a bad DM thing to do. There's a lot
How
of
about the
That's you.
GM who fills the room with onion farts? They need to cover that in the manual.
Do they cut?
Right.
No, they don't. That's what exactly. They
I
need
bet
to.
that happens a lot more often than grape situations.
You're right. I agree. I believe
Sweaty nerds, man. Sweaty nerds full of onions.
they should write a paragraph about it.
Look, first of all, these people do not understand who their market is at all. A paragraph in a book, people do not need to be told, adults do not need to be told how to behave by a company, right? They just don't.
Some do.
So at best, it's pointless, right? Right, but even if they did, they're not going to listen to a game manual. Oh, okay, this is how I'm supposed to behave. So at best, it's pointless. At worst, it's extremely alienating because the reason, that people play role-playing games in the first place is to get away from all that bullshit. And here you are, you've taken your government, this didactic like grade school crap, and you've forced it tip first into my hobby, right?
So they're graping
without
your
my
hobby.
permission. You have anally graped my hobby with a train.
Yeah. Now who's
I
familiar
feel
with the source
violated.
material?
Now I'm yes.
Put that on the checklist. Oh man.
So there you go.
Yeah, I think we beat that one up, huh?
There you go.
I get it. Like I do get it that we should as a I don't want to say community. I don't want to fall in that trap. We should as
it's not we. None of it. It's never we.
Human society should encourage better behavior of its people that engage in the society. Duh.
Better is subjective as hell, though. It's literally always the argument. Oh, be a better person. Well, I'm not going to be your better person. I'm going to be my better person, or even their better
Copy
person.
paste the 10 Commandments into the inside of every cover. You're covered.
There
now
you go.
what I did
Absolute rules.
10 Commandments.
What I did the thing is
The Gideon's Bible in the drawer.
So you can't use any other gods. Is that?
That's right. Not in,
it's funny.
Well, you can modify it a little bit.
I wanted like one time in one of the this is another bad idea for a DM is creating the Christian God in dungeon in there in like a faith, because it's a God. If you're a Christian, I'm going to offend you.
There's money
God is as interesting as Superman. Like he's boring. If you put him into a character and you create God in Dungeons, it's just a being that can do literally anything and has no weaknesses. Every god in Dungeons and Dragons has a weakness. You could conceivably, and it has been done many times in many campaigns, fight and defeat and kill a god in Dungeons and Dragons, and that's what makes it fascinating. You can't do that with the Christian God, and so he's very boring. So don't do that. Bad idea, DM. Bad.
I tried.
DM.
It didn't work. It's
see.
I went out there with my stick and just waved it. Nothing happened.
Oh, you tried to kill God. Oh, yeah, exactly. The other part of this, though, the other part of that is that it's a tell. When you see a paragraph like that, it's a tell. And I'm sorry that I'm not sorry, but I don't know what to say. Other than that's just is what it is. When you see a paragraph like that, you can agree with it. You can think, well, that's a reasonable, rational thought to have. Yeah, but when it's printed in a book, it's a tell. And that tell is we're about to be dealing with writers who are weirdos writing modules for weirdos. And so there was another
That's
paragraph.
about as spot on as it gets, though.
Also, there's going to be a lot of furry stuff.
Well, I'm sorry. Writers who are non-customers, writing content, writing games for non-customers. That's what you end up with. And what we saw, like what I did, I thought I took a picture. I thought I shared it in the group, but I couldn't find it. But one of the modules has you going through town talking to different NPCs. And there's an NPC, they describe this, they go into great detail describing how these NPCs look, what they like physically, what their traits are, what clothes they're wearing, who they are. Mm-hmm. Every single one of the NPCs had and they wrote it, described it. They had half-shaved heads that were purple. They wore military boots with shorts.
Sounds awful.
There was I believe there was
They're 60
two.
pounds overweight.
There was two characters that were that identified as another gender than that which they were. There was one who was a transsexual. Like, this is stuff that you go and read the books for all the nonsense that they write these disclaimers about the original books. I don't recall any time where they just they just go into great detail about the gender that an NPC identifies as, because it doesn't matter. That's weird. The only people who care that much about an NPC are non-customers who are gatekeepers of the industry.
And rapists with a specialization or fetish.
Yeah, somebody needs to make
Your words,
character
not
sheets,
mine.
new D&D character sheets with a slot for pronouns. $1 million idea. You can have it.
Yeah,
Right.
you assume it hasn't been done. Now I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
Google
you
that.
assume it
'Cause
hasn't
I'm
been done.
almost. Anyway, that's what I got. That's what I have. I place all the blame for the current situation of the OGL on the decisions, these exclusive, excommunicative decisions that Wizards of the Coast has been making over the last not a long time, very short amount of time that they've been making these decisions to isolate the vast majority of their customer base, and that's why we have the situation we're in. You want to be mad at something, be mad at that.
Since we have time, how does this
Yeah,
end?
sure. How does the scenario end? Like, how does Wizards of the Coast, like, how does this scenario end?
How does this phenomenon that we complain about every week, how does this end? It will end. At the very least, it will get boring, right? So how and when does this end? Because I don't know. Some of us would like to be back in the marketplace.
Right. Are you referring to like woke systems of injustice?
Yeah.
Or...
Yes.
Okay.
This cult. When does it end?
So I think it's a lot of what I was talking about earlier, where corporations start taking the correct measure of relationship building with their actual buying demographics, where they just start to ignore the crying and just go back to approaching actual demographics research and saying the people who buy this are
meet the customer.
can be actually labeled. First off, the ability to label your customer base is something that is pretty important when you're trying to develop and sell a product. And that is discouraged right now. You cannot talk about your demographics right now without having to address the issues that then come up because of it. And it's your problem and your choice to allow there to be a problem. If you say, I have to address this, it's sort of like the start of the apology tour. And in this case, it's like ahead of time. So you're making those clauses, those statements.
The first company to break rank is going to be criticized.
Right.
Strongly. Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe something like my company all the time, but that's exactly what we run up against all the time, which is saying the things the other ones are falling.
You're not losing money. Gaming goes.
No, it's always the point that every time there's a Reddit thread about TGG, we make more sales on our web store. Every single time.
Every time I see this.
Well, I think you are the end. I think you are the end to this, because just the fact that. Yeah, well, I mean, just the fact that you're supporting yourself financially off of your work, you've proven that it can be done.
And your work is not subjected to the rule set that we're talking about.
Others will follow.
That's true.
Well,
if you can,
as soon as you
the
get
marketing
rich,
channel fixed, like most of the process, most of the chain is sorted. But man, that last mile, the marketing bit, it's hard. It's so hard.
I think it ends. I think the pendulum swings back, and I don't think it swings back this way for a long time. I think it ends when these companies. I mean, they're losing money. Again,
they are.
The vast majority of people don't want this stuff.
I want to talk about the range of that pendulum real fast. So, in a normal setting, setting for this entire planet, actually. Because we all just experienced this entire planetary event a couple years ago. The pendulum doesn't usually swing as far or as hard as it was able to when everyone was forced into this safety-oriented shell. And everything was about countermeasures against threat. And that's where the conversation was having to exist around every topic, every controversy, every question you could possibly have was in this reclusive state that everyone was in starting in 2020, where before that, the conversation was more open because we were less reserved about anything. We were less self-protective.
It's true. They really have created a bubble for themselves.
Yeah.
Powered by social media, where you could just get rid of people who, like back in the day, you know, you had to face your critics. Not anymore.
And I'm still referring to COVID, obviously. Okay.
Oh, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
not anymore. You just silence them and get rid of them. And then you take an antidepressant to make the bad feelings go away.
Right.
You can get out of the house, but if you can't go anywhere, what's the point? And
Indeed.
a lot of that was dictated by what was happening in social media. And while, yes, there was a lot of, we did see a lot of, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of all blurred together, but I really started seeing the crazies come out in force like in 2016, when Trump won, like that, for love him or hate him, like that was an explosive time bomb that triggered the far woke left to
also the far right. Just let's no, yes, perspective. There was a huge range.
Not remotely
coming out
close.
Into the open to talk.
Talk maybe, but the far left was out for blood. They were out to cancel. They were out to come after your livelihood. That was not happening with the far right. The far right did stuff, but it was not that. And I'm not going to allow that. I mean, I allow whatever, but I'm not going to accept
Eddie will always try to equivocate, try to move.
Yeah, I'm not going to I'm not going to accept that dichotomy. But it certainly did get bad in the
extremists.
20s.
Extremists are the problem. That's always going to be my point.
I think, but I think what's happened though is that money, you can't argue with money, and so what's happened with you either have situations where people like Elon Musk come and buy a platform, or other people just create platforms, because that was always the argument of the left. Well, if you don't like it, just make it.
Arguing with money. How many times has this failed? Like the Ghostbusters failed, the Ultimate Rebuild failed, the Star Wars thing failed,
right?
The Witcher just failed.
But you have
failed.
Yes, but when you have
with it.
Because you have billions of dollars, so you can afford to keep arguing with it about it until you're cash poor, like Wizards of the Coast
you can pretend the reason is not the reason. You can,
so what's happened? But what's happened now? Like I was just looking at an article where the CEO of Victoria's Secret has been fired.
Thank goodness.
Okay,
can we please get the spank neck material? God damn.
Because people don't like. I'm sorry, they don't want to look at fat chicks in lingerie. It doesn't happen, no matter how many.
We want the angels back, man.
They want the angels, and so they lost money, and they lost enough money that it was either fire the CEO and get this nonsense out of here, or we go out of business. Bob Chapek and Bob Iger. Bob Iger is not a champion of the right, but he understands that money is important. Yeah.
He's not an idiot.
Yeah.
Well, no, he is an idiot, but he's not that kind of an idiot.
Right. And when we come to the platforms, we've got for the longest time, YouTube had control of the space. Well, now Rumble's public, and Rumble is crushing it.
Holy cow. Yeah, they are.
You've got
why aren't we on Rumble? Why are we on YouTube? Just throwing that out there.
We can be on both, right?
Yeah, we can, and we will. We will. Not. We'll grow. We'll go to Rumble. Fine. You've got this platform we were going to talk about tonight, but again, there's a lot of developments going on with the platform, and so he couldn't make it tonight, but we'll probably have him on the next one. But there's an opportunity every time.
Touch on that, like.
Yes. So Kickstarter and Indiegogo have become super woke and gatekeepy, and GameFound. And GameFound now. Yeah, all these platforms are becoming woke and gatekeepy. So what happened? Some guy who's in deep on the comic book side his name's Luke Stone. He's created his own platform, and it's looking pretty legit. It launches as of this recording. It launches in 5 days. It's called Fund My Comic, and it's not just going to be about. It's going to start with comics, but it's going to grow into everything else. Games. Yeah, because he understands that it's about creation. It's about making a space for the for creators. I was just there was something.
We need
There's
to push
some
this
other.
as hard as we can.
We will. But this is
Yeah.
what I'm like. This is how it ends. It ends with the companies facing
Open platforms.
Yeah. Yes. Other platforms coming in and companies that don't want to die, realizing that you can argue with money. Like you run out of money sooner or later. You run out of money, and you got it. And the shareholders will be at your throats if you don't start making money. That's how it ends. But what do I know? What do I know?
Right.
You know,
We're losing you, Will.
Will, the Chinese are after you, buddy. The Chinese are after you. On that note, how do you guys want this to end? Final thoughts, John. Go.
Yeah, well, there's that half, but it's not just enough for companies to fail. Other companies need to rise. It's evolution. It's survival of the fittest. Everyone's going to try stuff. The stuff that works will get more of that stuff. The stuff that doesn't work will go bankrupt. It's not a matter of waiting for the giants to change their mind. It's a matter of waiting for the giants to die and the new giants to take their place.
Eddie.
Yeah, I was keeping track of Will's feed here. Yeah, all right. So I mean, realistically, we are part of that solution. You know, I think we are. At least, you know, that's why we're putting all this effort in, right? To discuss these matters. And there's lots of other people that are talking about the situations where people are not allowed to thrive. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about just in general, it's just censorship is always going to be a problem. And it always needs to be addressed. You can't argue with money, we said. Well, you can argue with censorship. And it's always an uphill battle. There's always someone trying to say, you can't say that. And it's our job to always promote the free speech principles. And it's not free speech that gets argued that it's only free speech protected from the government saying you can't speak. No, it's the tenet that we should all be trying to stabilize in our environment.
Yeah, I think we need a new word for it to differentiate it from the legal right.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's the legal right and what we're talking about are vastly different.
Open discourse.
It's freedom of expression, you know, just to say that because that includes all of the arts. I think Dave Chappelle, when he won an award recently, he had what was it? The school. There was a school in maybe New York or something that he had attended that they wanted to call it Dave Chappelle's like wing, some building in the arts center. And he said, I don't want it to be my name until this school supports the concept of free expression. I want you to call it something else. So they decided to call it, you know, the Freedom Expression Building. And it's a really great message because that's the whole point is get in here and say stuff that's going to make somebody upset if you have to or feel the need to, or just because you literally can.
Also, and defend the people who are wrong. Like people are
offended
wrong
people are always wrong.
No,
right?
Defend the people who are wrong.
Oh, okay.
People are going to be
wrong. I'm like, yeah.
Give them the right to be wrong.
Give them the right to be wrong. Let them be wrong publicly. And you know, when people try to shut them down, said no, let them be wrong.
I think we have Will back.
Yeah.
Because
am I here?
Yeah, you're here.
Because everyone wants to defend the speech they agree with. Everyone wants to defend the speech they support or they think is going to better the community. But you need all speech. You need all speech so that, you know, it's like you've got to work with the entire stone to chip away the stuff. And don't chip away through censorship. Let it die on its own. Let it die through its wrongness.
Yeah. Just to show you how far we've come. You familiar with Noam Chomsky?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Back in the late 70s, early 80s, he penned a foreword to a book on Holocaust denial. He's Jewish. A book on Holocaust denial, just to make the point, right?
It will happen.
do not agree with what you have to say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm in
that
Chicago.
That was what the left
Spokane,
wing
Illinois,
was
famous
30 years ago. Yeah, it's Voltaire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think everyone is when it's supporting something they believe in, but when it's supporting something you don't believe in, it gets a lot harder to stand by that value. But let it be hard. Let it be hard. Stand by it anyway.
Right.
That kind of makes up what TGG is. I mean, we literally disagree on. I don't think anybody's minds were changed in this podcast on this panel.
Well, mine
No,
was.
but you might have
That's just what's
widened
coming.
it a little bit, your perspective. You know, that's
Well,
kind of the goal.
and that's the point. That's the
Yeah.
point. That is the spirit.
If I can help
of-
you redefine
the
something
spirit
by
of it.
adding a word or two, that helps.
Yeah.
That helps the conversation next time. It helps every conversation after that.
Well, this has been fun, guys. Thank you for chilling here. Please
Yeah.
stick around so we can say our proper goodbyes. But to everybody else, thank you for watching. Thanks for sticking through. And we're working on this. Unfortunately, Luke was going to be here. He was unfortunately unable to make it. But hopefully, the next show, we'll be able to talk about this really exciting platform that will help get to encourage that freedom of expression. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see y'all in the next podcast.